thanks to everybody as well for giving me so many encouraging messages. I've had so many people getting in contact with me. Literally, I've had like thousands of messages to answer back. Discovered this new DJ. We're doing this thing in Blackpool. Do you want to come and do it? It's this thing called Shabu, and this DJ's called Sasha. Like, where is it? What's the address? And they were like, it's Thursday night. It's at the Haçienda. Plugged my headphones into the back of the mixer and said, listen, if you want the party to carry on, we're going to have to fight them. Then I ended up going to prison.
Put on my raving shoes and I boarded the plane. Touchdown in a land where the skies are blue, in the middle of the pouring rain.
Lovely to see you again.
Lovely to see you, Dexter. Thanks for inviting me on. Thank you.
Thank the Lord that you got out of that very nasty incident safely.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And thanks to everybody as well for giving me so many encouraging messages. I've had so many people getting in contact with me. Literally, I've had like thousands of messages to answer back.
How are you feeling now?
I'm feeling loads better now, thank you. I've had to have like 3 or 4 weeks off, and my back, it's still got a couple of tiny little broken bones in it. But honestly, I've actually, you wouldn't believe it, but I've actually had worse back pain than this. They're knitting together really, really well, and it's not nerve damage. It's just you know, these 2 bones at the base of the spine. But apart from that, everything else has healed up really,
I really don't want
well.
to ask this question because, but I do want to ask it. But how did it happen? What happened?
Just out of nowhere, I was coming back from Manchester Sunday afternoon, minding my own business, doing 65, so not going fast, following a row of traffic, and the car that was in front of me did a crazy undertaking maneuver. You know, where you think, what are you doing, crazy bugger? You know. So I must admit, I probably went, what are you doing? Then I looked back round, and then there was a van that had like a T5 camper van, VW camper van, and it just stopped in the outside lane, and I just like just ploughed straight in about 65. I did my best to try to stop, but there was no stopping it. It was, you know, I wasn't like I say, I was a safe distance behind the car that I was in front of, behind, should I say. But then when he did this crazy maneuver, I must admit, you know, I kind of like looked across and thought, what are you doing? And then once I turned back around, I thought, bang. It was bad. It was bad.
We saw the pictures of the car.
Yeah, just concertina, you know.
Jesus,
but, you know, the airbags all went off, the windscreen went. You know, it was bad. But at the same time, of course, once there was 2 guys behind me, and they were amazing, and they kind of opened the car door, and then they pulled me out, and then the 3 of us were sat on the side of the motorway, and we were just saying, "You're alive!" You know, I think that's why I took the picture. I think I was just so in shock and so absolutely delighted to have got out of something as like bad as that. I couldn't believe it. Now, don't get me wrong, I had to get taken away in a neck brace, and you know, the full body thing where they strap you to it, where you're like this for about 6 hours whilst they're waiting to see you, another full CT scan and all that business. So it wasn't any bed of roses, and I've definitely had 3 or 4 weeks of having to be off work and downtime. But the amount of people who've been truly wonderful, of course, my wife being the top of the list on that, you know, just nursing me back to fitness, and just so many people, club owners, promoters, just mates, just people that I don't even know, you know, from the scene, just getting in contact to say, you know, get yourself well, sunshine. So I'm eternally grateful, and you know, all that business. I'm really, really glad that
Does it give you a new reality on life now?
Yeah, definitely.
A bit of a wake-up call.
Oh, definitely. So the thing is that, I'm not going to lie, I've gone very, very fast in cars over the years. Very fast, probably way too fast. I've been a bit of a demon in my times, but this was just out of nowhere, doing 65,
like
and it happened in a flash. You literally got time to go, and then bang.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was not even that long, just like
And just for everybody who's listening in and viewing, I hadn't organised this just because of your car crash. We'd actually organised this
Yeah, it was
before,
before.
hadn't we? It was like the day before or something. We were.
It totally was. It actually was. Yeah.
So yeah, it's it's really weird. In the season started here in Croatia, and I've seen 3 car crashes in 3 days.
Right.
Only minor ones. 2 of them, the people couldn't even walk. They were that drunk.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Wow, that's terrible.
Yeah,
That's
it's like the Wild
absolute. Yeah.
West. It's like the Wild West over here. With drinking
That's
sometimes.
crazy. That's crazy.
It used to be like in the old Ibiza days.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing in the older Ibiza days. You know, sorry to cut in on you, but you know, in the Garlands days, we used to ride backwards and forwards from one side of the island to the other with like 8 people in that Garlands
The Beetle.
Yeah, the Herbie Beetle with the 14
Didn't it
on
end
it.
up down a mountain or something?
No, there's a bit of a story to that actually. They lent Huey and Barry lent me the car, lent me and Tolly from Kiss the Funk the car, and we were going to do a boat party. So we'd driven from, you know, where Cam Mises is, you know,
Yeah, of course, yeah.
where the hospital is. So we'd gone from Cam Mises over to go to play on a boat, and then go from there to Plastic, and then when we came off the boat, before we got there, the car already had some overheating problems, which we'd encountered a couple of days before when, you know, we'd just been into Ibiza town and thought, oh, it gets really hot really quick, this car. You know, I told them about it. They were like, oh, it'll be fine. Anyway, going across before the days of the motorway, I think it might have been, you know, we were going across, and then out of nowhere, like, smoke was pouring out of it, so we had to flag down a cab and go to do the boat party. So I called my mate who was over, a guy called Ben J from Slinky, and asked him if I'd left the cars under the keys for in fact, he had to come over, collect the keys from Plastic, then go and buy a tow rope and go with his car and go with his mate and go and tow the car back to Cam Mises. And when he went back across to get it, it had gone, and no one has ever seen the car since. Not to this day, no one. And so, and the thing is, I was getting loads of missed calls because we went to do an after party in Plastic. So we were sort of just in Plastic, and I'm seeing all these calls coming through. I'm thinking, bloody hell, I'm playing. So I end up finished playing, and then got on the phone. He's like, mate, which pound is it in? We've been to every single pound going. It's not in any.
It stuck out like a sore thumb, didn't it?
I know.
It looked like a Herbie car, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, white with the stripe across it with the 14 on it. Gone, and it's never ever been seen since.
That is hilarious. I knew something had happened to it, but in my warped memory, I thought someone had used it and it had gone down a mountain. That is probably another car. And another story,
quite possibly, but unfortunately, it was us. And the thing is, that's a hard one to live down. Every single time I sort of out with Barry Mackey, he'll be like, "Do you remember the time you lost the car?"
He will never leave that alone.
He'll never let it go. He'll never let it go. And then I'm thinking, have they let this car? You know, where's this car gone exactly?
Or is it the longest practical joke ever? So how did it all begin for you, Rob? The music, just getting into the music, the DJing scene and everything. Because I've seen you about for donkey's years.
Yeah, well, I think it all started probably the first sort of times where I started to get interested in that kind of, in any kind of music really was through my dad and his albums. He had loads and loads of Rolling Stones albums and
Me too.
Yeah, and then loads of other sort of like more funk-based albums, and Lonnie Liston Smith, and the album from the theme from Shaft. You know, there was a double album, theme from Shaft, and the first track on the theme from Shaft is the guitar lick that is in Young MC.
Okay.
So, you know, and it's like super funky, and I got into that kind of funky style, and then from there I got into jazz funk, and then from there more into electro. Loved electro, and also loved, like, you know, new wave punk, all that type of stuff back in the Wow, really early 80s, even maybe even like the late 70s, I hate to say. But and then out of there, yeah, into the electro when we were kids, when we were sort of 16 or so. First time we heard Planet Rock was I grew up in Milton Keynes, so for my sins, and that's we used to go to this club called the Starting Gate in Milton Keynes, and it was also called Poppers, so you
Oh
could kind of
God.
like and it was a mixture of new wave and electro, as well as playing stuff by this Native Love, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Proper, almost like high energy sort of stuff. And yeah, we were
Okay.
listening to all this stuff. And this guy used to play on a big, he used to play and then also play videos as well. And he'd play these crazy videos, and he'd play Talking Heads, Once in a Lifetime, a
Wow.
proper mixture. And it was the first time that we heard tracks like Planet Rock by Africa Bambaataa and Play at Your Own Risk, Planet Patrol, and all those kind of tracks. It was a real mishmash. And then this guy, we got to know him. He came out. He was our DJ. We were 16. But he was our man. And it turns out that it's Evil Eddie Richards from
Okay.
back in the day, who did all the acid house parties and used to do all the sunrise stuff. And that's our first entry into that kind of music. And then
Ah.
what he did was that he then started to introduce, the more of the house music type stuff as well. The really early sort of future tracks and all that
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
And all that stuff started to come through, because we used to follow him. First we used to go to that club, then wherever he went, wherever he played, we'd think, right, we'll go and see this
Because
guy.
I was speaking to Kirkfield the other day, and
Yeah.
he worked at Sunrise behind the bar.
Yeah, yes he did. Yeah, he
Didn't
did.
he?
Yeah.
Did
Yeah,
you
he
know
did.
him back then?
No, I didn't know him at all. I
He
was
was a
just a
Ribena
punter.
man, wasn't he?
Yeah, I was just a punter. I probably bought a Ribena off him. I
Yeah.
just used to go with my mate. So back in those days, I used to play semi-professional football for Bracknell Town. So I
No
didn't
way.
drink or anything. I was just loved dancing, like literally, I could dance all night long to like jazz funk type stuff. I loved all that kind of stuff. Even a bit of like, I guess a little bit of, break dancing, kind of. Not, I was never very good, but I just loved to dance, and I used to go to all this kind of stuff. But it was suited and booted. It was like Oxford shirts and like double-breasted jackets and chinos, that kind of stuff. And then out of the blue, my mate Danny James, he said he knew this girl who we used to go to school with called Rachel, and he was like, look, there's a party on tonight, do you want to come to this party? I said, yeah, of course I do. He said you won't need those kind of clothes though. You can go wear whatever you want. What we have to do is we have to go ring this number at this phone box,
No
meet
way.
everybody
Yeah.
at the Milton Keynes bus station. Went to meet everybody at Milton Keynes bus station, and then went in a convoy, and then went from there to out towards Northampton, and we ended up driving down these country lanes where there's people shining torches
Like
to show.
convoys.
Yeah, to where you go,
Yeah.
and then there was like a big fun fair in the distance, and I thought, where are we going here? And then it ended up we went to Santa Pod racetrack, and it was a sunrise. I don't know if it was actually a sunrise or whether it was a Back to the Future. Actually, it might have been a Back to the Future was the first thing that we went to, and it was amazing. And they had all these people playing, but we didn't know anybody's names.
No. No.
Now on reflection, I actually know some of those people that played, and it was people like Adamski and Oakenfold,
Yep. Cox and people like
and
that.
Carl Cox, and in the
Yeah.
morning, Carl Cox playing Young MC. This is the thing. So
Yeah.
then
Yeah. Yeah.
he played it, and I was like, oh my God, it's the theme from Shaft. When you sort of, because house music, it's such a I don't know whether you call it a magpie or a jackdaw. It picks things up from all over the place, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And melds it all together. And when I heard that with the break beats behind it, with like the Apache beat behind it, again, a track that I'd heard on my dad's stereo, he had a super amazing Technics hi-fi system that had a variable speed deck, but it wasn't a 1210 or anything. It was just one of the very first ones that they did with a variable speed on it. So so I used to listen to those kind of tracks. So then I started thinking, right, it's bringing all these things together, and I used to play bass. I used to play bass for a band called No Comment in the 80s.
So you're a musician then as well.
Yeah, I'm a bass
You
player.
have the musical background.
Yeah, and
Right,
and I can play guitar as well. And I can program. These days I pretty much program everything. I can program any sort of piano sounds or
Keyboarding,
drums, riffs, or anything like that. But
years of practice.
yeah, but it's just given me the knowledge of the music, and it's taught me things like the power of contrast and all that kind of stuff, like going from certain keys to certain keys creates different energy in the room and that kind of thing. And I think all of those things, definitely the bass playing thing, that's why it doesn't matter which of the styles I play, it's always got a cracking bass line to it. That's what I like.
Fascinating listening to where DJs have come from, because some come from like a very musical background, like DJ G, who I spoke to the other day. He was in a band, very musical, learned to mix at Bora Bora.
Wow.
And then there's other people who just liked what people would look at, like Tristan Ingram, who was a rep for 18 to 30, and he was just trying to figure it all out. And there's so many different entrances to how people have started, some with no musical background at all, some with musical backgrounds, and it's fascinating to hear where people have come from. I think you can do it.
Yeah, you can do it both ways. I don't think if you're not musical, you can't be a great DJ.
Absolutely.
Because it's about making good choices. It's about thinking ahead. Bit like I always sort of liken it to playing pool, where you're always trying to get back onto the next shot, where you think, so you're not just playing whatever shot you're playing. You're always thinking, right, what's coming next? What's coming after that? How's the room changing? How's the vibe changing? And then sometimes thinking, I can change the vibe, turn the page. Sometimes that can be such a powerful thing.
Very similar to what Jonathan Ulysses was saying to me the other day about how Pepe Rosallo from Space was telling him how to read the room. He said you got to look at the bar staff, and you got to look at the security, and if they're tapping their feet, and then you got to make them chill out and go and have a drink, and then bring them back, and then just really make a story.
You do.
And he played so many different genres throughout his 17 years at the club. That he had to understand exactly every genre, and you're multi-genred, obviously. I remember you first as on the harder tip. Definitely. I definitely remember that, because that's I used to be bang into hard house.
Did you? Right. Okay.
Absolutely bang into hard house.
I think it's a lot of people's guilty pleasures. Some of the people, I still love it. Some of the people, that are involved in some of the coolest labels come through hard house, like the people at Tool Room, Matt Smallwood, people like that, who've definitely got a grounding in that world, and that world comes out of the back of actually playing house that's hard, in terms of going
more
to trade
on house, wasn't it? And it just went harder and harder and harder. But then it split to that uplifting and that pumping sort of house, and then it got a bit of a bad press, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Yeah,
and I was really disappointed with that, but I think it's kind of like gone full circle again.
Yeah. I mean, I've just come back from the Tidy Weekend.
I've been reading about it.
Yeah,
it was amazing.
It was utterly stunning. The people there, the vibe, the love, the attention to detail that Amadeus and Andy and Sam Townend and all of the team, the one thing that's always stood out about Tidy Tracks is the reason that they are so good and so successful at what they do is because they've got the best team. They've got such a good team, and all of those people do very special things for to create different facets. They're just on it, and they work so well together.
They've all been there for a long time as well, haven't they?
Yeah.
And I always find that with nightclubs,
Mm,
a really good nightclub
mm,
or a business,
mm.
say a business as well, has had staff working there for a long period of time,
Yeah,
and they're
yeah.
happy and comfortable, and
Continuity,
it's
mate.
yeah,
Continuity
yeah,
is
yeah.
is very important, you know, and having the trust where you don't micromanage everything, where people have great ideas and you just think that's a great idea.
And
You know, great.
Tidy have been going so
Run with
long
it,
now.
run with it. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. You know, and they're beautiful people. All the people that go, they love it. They're so committed to it. And you know, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be involved in all that kind of stuff. And yes, I've had a really quite long, twisty, turny journey to get there. You know, I've gone through various sort of styles. You know, talking about all of that kind of stuff. You know, I started off playing. You know, proper old school house. I mean, so just going
Mm,
back to kind of like how I got started.
yeah.
You know, I kind of got an old turntable. My dad's
Technics.
Technics, borrowed that from him. My best mate, who I went to those first acid house parties with, he had a similar sort of turntable. I don't even know what it was. And then I got a mixer from Tandy, which
Oh
turned
my
into
God, I
that.
remember them. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the little
Yeah,
realistic mixer. I got the
yeah.
realistic mixer on a Saturday afternoon, and I got the two decks. He was out. He was out shopping, doing something I don't know what. So I got the two decks, got the mixer, got them plugged in, and I was like, right, here we go. Put two tracks on, and then just did the faders, and then it was just like, I was like, oh my god! And so I got the manual back out. There must be something wrong with this because it's supposed to mix the records. You know what I mean? It says it's a mixer,
Yeah.
and I've struggled with it for a while. And then he came home and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "The mixer's not working. I must have it wired in
No
wrong. Tell us
way.
that." And he's like, "Mate, you know you've got to like line them up, get them, you know." Actually get them in similar tempos, do all that kind of stuff, and he kind of showed me what that meant, and then I thought, right, okay.
Do
Oh,
you remember your first mix when in time? Do you remember that
uh,
moment when you went, "Oh my God, that's what I've got to do. That's what I've got to listen for."
yeah, you know what?
Do you remember?
I don't necessarily know if I'm trying to like take myself back to that moment. I had a kind of period where, so my dad used to do. This is the thing. I think this is the entry point. Is that he used to do tapes where he would splice the
Wow.
gaps
Yeah.
so that he would, whatever music it was, there would be no gaps when we went into the, when went in the car anywhere. There was no gaps because he'd spliced them. He'd done the old school splice. Sorry that my WhatsApp's going off there.
Yeah, my
And
phone is. I'm just hitting it up there. Mine's been
sorry
going off as
about
well.
that. So I'm used to having no gaps. So I started doing mixes and tapes just like that. That's the thing. That's how I first started. So that's how I first started lining stuff up. And then after that, well, listen, trying to mix on these two decks,
Yeah.
you literally had to learn to slow it down by doing that on the spindle and then spinning the other spindle to try to keep me
Catch
time.
up.
That's how it was done. And then I went from there to I hired a set of double decks. I used to sell cars when I first. Sorry, there's a bit more to the story. After doing all these, going to all these acid house parties down south, and we went to all of those ones, 88, 89, we went to all the ones that were on the circuit, all the Back to the Futures, all the Sunrises, got to know a few people that worked there and ran some stuff and all that kind of stuff. You just fall in with some people, don't you? And yeah, we went to all of those. And then my mate, Danny, again, he moved from there and he went to university in Manchester, and he called me like late 88, I think it might have been very late 88, and said, "Mate, I'm not being funny, all that stuff that we've done that we've loved every second of, I found this place that you need to come to." And it was a Haçienda. And
Oh
he
my
said,
Lord.
"It's amazing." I said, "Well, when's it on?" Bearing in mind, I used to work for BMW. I used to run the body shop in Maidenhead at BMW. And he said to me, "It's on tonight." I said, "Well, it's Wednesday night." He's like, "Yeah, but it's so good." So I used my company car to drive up to Manchester because he called me about 5 in the afternoon. I was like, I'm just going to get changed. I'm just going to go. So I went up there. I went in this 535i. That I borrowed from BMW and shot up the road and parked it round the corner from this place. There's a pub there called the Mucky Duck that's just around. It's not called, I think it's called something the Duck, but they used to call it the Mucky Duck. Parked it round the corner from there, you know, in this, not far from, I guess, where the warehouse project is now in Manchester. And then went round and then he somehow managed to sort out for us to get in on the bloody guest list. So we got in and then it just had this kind of like amazing atmosphere and it had this really cylindrical sound. I can't really explain it. It had quite a high ceiling, but it was almost, I don't know, I can't really explain it. It was like the music was going round in a drum almost.
Okay.
You know, like almost like in a cylinder. It was just like this really strange acoustics to it. Amazing, but like very odd, and just everybody was so lovely, and I just thought this is great. And then he said it's on Fridays as well. So then I drove back up on the Friday, went there on the Friday, and then started going pretty much every Wednesday and Friday for about 5 or 6 months or so, and then it just got to a point where it wasn't going well at work down
It wouldn't be, would it?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. And I was losing interest in playing football and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Even though you know, it was going pretty good. You know, I was playing. I played in the FA Cup and all this sort of thing. You know, in the early in the round before the third round. So I did all of that stuff, and it was going pretty good on that front. But then the Haçienda came along, and it took its toll, I've got to say. And I kind of thought, I've just about had enough of this. And I was having some problems at work, and I was having some problems with my then partner, and I put all my stuff in the car one Friday night and just drove up about as far as Northampton, and then called her and just said, I'm leaving. In fact, I've left, and called work as well. And just said, I had my notice in. I'm done. I've had enough. And then drove up to Manchester with all my property in the back of the car, and left it round the corner. I had my own car. Apart from having a company car, I had my own really, really rubbish old Renault 12, which looks like the bonnets at either end of it. Proper ropey car. Drove up there, parked it up, went into the Haçienda, had a great time, then went to my mate's house. He was renting a place in Mold, which is just outside. It's like North Wales, but it's like 40 minutes from Manchester. Moved into his place for a short time. Then we rented a house in Rochdale, which is on the corner of Manchester.
Yeah.
And then moved from there into Manchester sort of direction, and just got to know people on the circuit, got to know a few people, and I used to hire a little room where I used to have my deck set up, and I used to practice all the time in there. And then the people that were next door, they came in and they said, mate, we really love your music, and we do like we do dat-to-dat recording, and we work with this fashion company as well called Goy, and we wonder whether you could come and do some live music for us. You know, I've played. They used to ask for my mixes, and they were like, we played the mixes to these guys who turned out to be the Donnelly brothers, who are pretty connected guys. And they were like, oh yeah, come and do this fashion show. I was like, yeah, brilliant. Like, where is it? What's the address? And they were like, it's Thursday night, it's at the Haçienda. So I ended up going and playing at the Haçienda on a Thursday night, and then out of the back of that, I ended up, because I used to do a bit of sales stuff as well, and I was a bit of a live wire and all the rest of it, and they were like, well, we're looking for a sales rep. Do you want to come and work? You know, why don't you leave selling cars? I used to sell cars for Vauxhall when I first moved up to Manchester, and they were like, well, leave that and just come and be our sales rep. And I ended up being the first sales rep for Goy, which ended up being a huge label, you know. So
massive.
Yeah,
Absolutely
massive. And then they used to give me loads of encouragement with the mixes, and they used to say to me, we want you to come and do this thing on a Thursday night. We've discovered this new DJ. We're doing this thing in Blackpool. Do you want to come and do it? And I always thought it was a test. I was thinking, it's a test. I don't know whether it's a good idea for me to do it. It's a Thursday night. I'm not so sure. Anyway, they were like, well, you should come and do it. It's this thing called Shabu. And this DJ's called Sasha. At the time, there was
Wow.
nobody knew who that was, you know.
Yeah, yeah. What year was that?
Would have been like 18, probably might have been 89, 90, I would have
Yeah, 'cause
thought.
he started
1990, you know, mate. Yeah,
91,
1990.
92. I started hearing about him.
Yeah, 1990, I think, because
Yeah.
that was that particular summer was the year of Gaza and the Italian World Cup and all that kind of stuff. And I used to, this place I had, it was in Chinatown in Manchester, and I used to be mixing and just smelling roast pork all night long, just thinking, yeah.
I lived in Eccles for a little while.
Oh, did you?
When I come back from Ibiza, I lived in Eccles, and then I moved back over to Croatia. And I loved Manchester. I was there for like
brilliant. I mean, at that time, it was unbelievable.
I missed all that, unfortunately. The Sankey's was still open when I got there.
Yeah.
And that, I think it was like the final period of Sankey's. But
yeah,
I haven't really been in England for many years. I've been in either Ibiza or in Croatia.
Where you are now,
yeah. So you've just answered. So that was kind of your first proper gig.
Yeah,
that Haçienda.
Yeah, it was definitely one of them. Yeah, sorry. On the side of that as well, in order to fund all of this and to buy some actual 1210s, this is the thing. Is in order to do that, I had to save the money up, and in order to save the money up, right opposite where I worked in Manchester, there was a little disco shop that hired out double decks, and I used to sometimes go in there and hire, like the proper old school double decks. I used to hire out the double decks and take them back to my place in Rochdale and try to fathom out how to like play music, all the rest of it. And I got speaking to this guy, and he said, do you want to be on our DJ agency? I'm doing weddings and doing bars, I could probably get you a bit of work if you want. And I was thinking, well, that's going to pay for the decks and for the hire, everything else. I may as well just give it a go. You need to be able to play. It doesn't matter where it is. You've got to try to, find somewhere to see what it's like playing in front of people. And I did a gig in Wythenshawe in Manchester, and it's definitely a bit fruity in Wythenshawe. I think it's a fair thing to say, not wanting to offend anybody from Wythenshawe. I could name you 10 other fruity areas in Manchester and in Leeds and every other city going. But Wythenshawe definitely quite fruity, and I can remember going over there to play in this pub. I think it might have been called something like the Black Bull or something, right in the centre of Wythenshawe. And it was a mixture of people that were into anything from the 70s, 80s, and then some newer stuff. So I would play the Beatles, and I would play Tainted Love and all that kind of stuff. And then supposedly to do 20 minutes of like Pump Up the Jam and, a few tracks from the Haçienda. But there was loads of people that on a Saturday night, they just went to the pub. They might have gone to the Haçienda on some other nights, but they just went to the pub, and then they were like, yeah, play another one. And you'd slap another Haçienda tune on, or another tune from all the other things that were on in Manchester. Thunderdome was also a massive thing as well that Jay Weirden was doing, and I used to go there and used to play some Thunderdome tracks in this Wythenshawe pub, and it got to a point where the landlord was like, you need to play some Beatles now, sunshine. Otherwise, you're in serious. You're out on your ear. So that's kind of like the first time that I got a taste for. I think that's why I think it's really important sometimes for people to do them kind of things, because it allows you to think. It's about what you're playing now and what you play next. And it doesn't, sometimes, don't get me wrong, I do lots of stuff where I mix in key and all that kind of stuff and layer things with acapellas that are all in the same key. But sometimes you just need to drop a weapon out of nowhere. Boom, right, have that. Bang, one-on-one, bang, 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 get them in there, way, and it taught me how to do that, really, until I could really get used to blending and mixing properly. So it was a bit of a journey, but I have actually still got my first tape, funnily enough, and it's got all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I have, mate. Yeah.
Have you ever uploaded it?
I haven't. No, I haven't. I haven't. I haven't actually listened to it for a long time. But I know that there was a lot of thought gone into it. There was a lot of thought, and the thing is that when I was doing the sales repping, it would take me to other cities as well. When I was doing the Geo Goy stuff, I was going to any of the coolest arcades in Liverpool and all over the northwest and beyond. Like way beyond, like down to the southwest, all over the place. And I'd find out what the coolest clubs were and see if I could meet up with the people that were running that stuff and give them a tape. And I went over to Liverpool one day and I met Mike Nola from Quadrant Park and
Wow.
sat and I had a drink with him in Quadrant Park. And, with the old brass ones on, with the old brass balls on, where you're absolutely bulletproof, you're 21 years of age, and you're just like, mate, I just want to play at the quad. And he's like, right, well, let me have a listen to the tape. And then he called me and he's like, right, okay, you can come and play. I was like, well, yeah.
Wow.
So I played at the quad, and then of course from playing at the quad, that gave me some other avenues and some other sort of like currency, to be able to get other stuff.
Yeah,
And you can say,
yeah,
well,
some
I've played here. Credibility. Yeah.
Haçienda, they're going to go, okay.
It definitely
it
helped.
opens the doors.
It definitely helped. But at the same time as that, I know we're going. I try to keep it as brief as possible.
No, this is all very, very on topic. Don't worry.
All right, no worries. But at the same time as doing all of that on the Friday nights, I was doing the Haçienda stuff. But I had a very good mate who was one of the live sound engineers. He'd been the live sound engineer for Joy Division. A guy called he passed away now, Rex Sargent, God bless his soul. And I ended up living in his house in Rochdale, and he worked in a recording studio in Rochdale called Sweet 16, and that was Hookie's studio from New Order. So I used to go to their studio, and I got to know all those guys as well. And
networking.
When it just falls, boom, 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 things like that. Just.
But think about it though. You've made your own luck.
I know. I guess so. But you need some breaks as well. This is the thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You need that, and then somebody to go, he's all right. He's all right, him. Especially bearing in mind that I was from down south. So you've got a small barrier to leap over as well, which was easier than ever because of how Acid House was and all the rest of it. But the thing is that Rex Sargent, he was from a place called Blackburn, and I used to go over to his dad had a garage in Blackburn that did van hire, like a big unit where they'd service the vans, had the pits and to put the vans across and all the rest of it. And I went to his place one Saturday, and I was sat upstairs in their office. They had one of those offices where you walk up the windy staircase, and then you're in like an office that looks down into the into the garage, if you like. And I was up there, and then was talking to these couple of guys who were his mates, and they said, do you want to come to a party? I said, well, what kind of party? They said, Acid House party. I was like, well, I've done Acid House. I'd love that. That sounds great. And then I conjured up this picture of the sunrise raves where you had Tony Colson, Hater there, and all those guys with clipboards, and it was very, very highly organized, where they told people that they were doing soul to soul videos and they needed to have 1,000 people there as props, and they were very slick. Those guys, they were super slick. Now, I'm not saying that the Blackburn guys weren't slick, but they were raw. They were raw, and I went to this party, and it had 3 sides on it. This warehouse thing in a place called Pump Street. I think it was a like bubbles. that.
Blow bubble. Yeah, with
Yeah,
the kids love.
it was a bubble factory. That's what it's called, I think. It's called the Bubble Factory in a place called Pump Street. And it had 3 sides on this warehouse, and the windows were kicked out. And there was asbestos dust on the floor. And then there was a guy playing like Jim Morrison's speech over "Love Will Take Us Apart," tear us apart, and then he would play. Doug Lazy, Let It Roll into it, and like where you think, wow, this is mental. And loads of hip house. They loved hip house and they loved Italian house, all that kind of stuff. And it was raw and it was amazing. And there was about 300 people there. And then I just got to know this brother and sister brother and sister. They're both called Clack, Amanda and a brother, and they did the drinks, a bit like Kirk Field did the drinks.
Okay.
And their mate also, this guy called Preston Bob, operated the camera, so there's always like video footage of it and all that kind of stuff going on. And I got to know them all very well. And then they liked my tapes, and then they were playing the tapes in the van. And the guys who were running the parties are saying, "Who's this playing on the tape? This is good. We really like this." And then they're like, "It's Cockney Rob." That's what I was just known as Cockney Rob for ages. And Cockers. And I just struck up a rapport with these guys. And Tommy, Dumbarton Tommy, who's he's the lead character, and his brother George Smith, and some amazing characters, and another DJ called Shaq. And another DJ who I ended up living with for a while, who's still around now, who plays in Liverpool, and his name is Mick Singh. What a brilliant name that is. Mick Singh, mate. Yeah, and he's still around and he's still playing, and they just gave me a break. They were like, "Right, listen, we like these tapes. Do you want to play at the place?" There was a bar called Minstrels, and it ended up where loads of people used to come and congregate at Minstrels, right in the centre of town. And that's where you would then get the phone call, and people would be like, "Right, it's on, it's going from here." And then when they'd all left from Minstrels, where we were resident, me and Mick Singh and a couple of other people. When everybody left, we would then go and do what was called the BBC, which was the Blackburn Buzz Corporation pirate station, so that people could tune into it, and then we could also give people the location for the parties from that. And as a result of that, then it just transpired that they'd be like, "Well, you've got your records, come and play." And it was the days of DJ Shaq who ran it all. Bearing in mind, it went from being 300 people one week to then being 500 the next, to then being 1,000, to then being 1,200, and within the space of I'd say 8 months or so.
This is what Kirk was saying about
ridiculous.
The raves at that time at Sunrise just went from
just
5,000
organic
to 10,000 to 15,000. It's
crazy.
Whoa!
Whoa!
What was his words? He said he's like, he turned to the barman and said, "They are never going to stop this."
No, it was outrageous. It went to being about. Well, some of them were like 3,000, some were 5,000, some were 7,500. Outrageous parties, unbelievable. And DJ Shaq had control of everything, and he had pretty much the Blackburn shepherd's crook. So if people were playing, it was going well. You'd be on for. You never knew how long it was going to go for. How long you were going to be on for before it was like, okay, next person on. And loads of people used to come across and bring their tunes. John Kelly, that's the first place that I met John Kelly, and I met Sasha again there at those parties as well. And I'd met him a couple of times at a couple of raves that Guillaume Goy had put on, so I knew him. I could see, you can see all these people coming along, and you just get a shot. First time I met John Kelly, had a jester's hat with two were there, and another one that went forward, with balls on the end, with big bells on the end. And we just got chatting, and he was like, "I want to be a DJ." I was like, "Yeah, I want to be a DJ." And we both had crates of records with us. Like, look, we got a crates with us, and then we just became friends from that, and that's kind of like where all that kind of grounding came from, and then from doing those parties, like I didn't play every one of them. No, I was just like, you know, played at a few of them, but I was involved in some of the other events that they did in other clubs and other pubs that they did. But when I say pubs, you'd have hundreds of people trying to get in. Like you couldn't
Yeah.
get another person in. There's
Yeah,
a place called Set End that they used to do, and it was just outrageous. Such a good vibe. So that kind of got us all going, you know, doing all that kind of stuff. And then when they broke the spirit of the party, when Margaret Thatcher eventually kind of stamped it all out and brought in the party squad just before the criminal justice bill happened, you know, I mean, there was a big party. I think it was called Strawberry Fields, this party, and in a place called Nelson in Blackburn, and the police came along and they just terrorized 7,500 people, and it was quite horrible, to be fair, you know, hitting people with buttons and really, you know, hitting pregnant women, and just like not cool, but at the same time
really hitting the tax money in the pubs, wasn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
This is what I was talking about with Kirk, and it was just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I suppose less and less people were drinking, and going to pubs, and more people were taking ecstasy, and it wasn't a taxable commodity.
No, and
they had to shut this shit down, man.
They did, and also I think there was a very large element that I think sometimes doesn't get discussed, and that was just trying to put one over on establishment sometimes, you know, doing stuff that you really shouldn't do, but because there were so many of you, they couldn't really control it. But what Thatcher did was she brought in, she brought in all the police that were doing the coal mine strikes.
That's right. Yeah.
So they still had all of the riot gear, and they still had all of the vans and everything else. And then they started to deploy them on a Saturday night to the worst trouble spots, of which ours was definitely one of those. And they ended up squashing it in 91, early 91, probably February 91, something like that. Like I say, this Strawberry Fields party, they smashed it to bits. Yeah. But by that point, it had all become quite slick, you know, and the parties were doing stuff like breaking into. Blackburn was quite a developing town, so you had loads of brand new places springing up that were like the new post office, you know. So the buildings were awesome, and they were very big, and then they'd have like a hut at the end of the building, which would be the control office, if you like, and then they'd put the DJs on the top of the control office and looking down, you know, absolutely amazing.
I've been to a rave in a post office headquarters,
right,
in Croydon.
Have you?
Abandoned.
Right, yeah.
It wasn't too long ago either.
Wow, amazing! Yeah,
just a few years back. And it was all over the papers because someone chopped their finger off. I don't know if you remember this.
Oh no, I don't remember that.
They had the post office headquarters, been there for years, closed it down, and then someone just had the balls to put an illegal rave in there, and it went on and on and on. The police finally closed it down. Then you see all the pictures of them wheeling their equipment out at the end.
Oh, mental!
This was like literally not many years ago.
Yeah, you know, well, there was a little spate of it, wasn't there? There was a little spate. You know, I certainly couldn't get involved in any of that because, this is the thing, is that out of the back of all of that, when all of that it got squashed in Blackburn, then by this point I'd moved to Leeds. I'd started playing a bit in Leeds. I'd sort of spread my wings across the Leeds, met a few people over this side, met my then girlfriend, and she lived in Leeds. And then, you know, before you know it, you're like, oh, right, I live in Leeds, you know.
Yeah, I was wondering how you ended up there.
Yeah.
You were there a long time. Are you still there now?
I'm still there, yeah. I'm here right now. Yeah. I'm here right as we speak, and I don't think I'll ever move back. This is my home now. You know, I've lived here twice as long as I did down south now, so so it does definitely feel like my home, you know. And I've never really fully lost the accent or anything, but I drop in and out, you know. Sometimes people say, "Where are you from?" I'm like, I get the odd Yorkshire phrase in amongst the Cockney.
When I moved to Manchester, when I come back from Ibiza, I was really anxious that people would pick up that I wasn't from the region.
Right, yeah, yeah.
But then I found that people were so much bloody friendlier.
Oh, definitely, yeah. It's great up here.
Because I'm originally from Croydon.
Yeah.
Rave in South London, Vauxhall, Brixton, that sort
Yeah,
of area,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
which aren't nicest areas as well.
No,
And central London, and but then as soon as I moved to like Manchester, and I think I did like one of my first days out at work was in Salford,
right.
actual
Yeah,
Salford,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the main shopping
yeah,
centre,
yeah,
and I was nervous.
yeah.
I've heard about this place, you know, and what a lovely bunch of people.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
I love it
yeah,
up here. I would never change the course of what I've done. I'm still, I still do lots of stuff down south anyway, which is all
yeah.
good. So I get to dip my toe in and out of both. But this has been, everyone's been so welcoming. This is the thing. So I wouldn't really want to change. And I guess so. The thing is that when those parties finished in Blackburn, they were looking for other places to do stuff, and of course, because I knew some people from those parties, they phoned me to say, "Oh, look, maybe we should do something over in Leeds. If we do anything in Leeds, we'll give you a call." And then they said, "Give me a call," and said, "Listen, we're going to do this thing in Leeds. Do you want to play?" And I'd been doing a wedding in Manchester, so I had all my stuff, like the full setup, not double deck. So by that point, I had Technics to do the weddings. I had done this wedding, and I left there, and I stopped at the service station, and I changed out of my stuff that I used to have to wear for doing weddings, like suit type,
Yeah,
shirt and tie,
course.
shirt and tie. Stopped, changed into the old hooded top and tracky bottoms,
Rave
and
clobber.
yeah, absolutely, and set off and followed the convoy from there to a place called Gildersham in Leeds, which is just on the corner. Just before you go up the M62, you come off the M621, which is like literally that's the road into Leeds, and then probably 1 mile from that junction, there was an old Sony warehouse, and they took it over, and basically they set the party up in there, where they actually built the speakers inside the venue. They were so ingenious, the people that did this stuff. Joe Fossard and another guy called Jules. They were
You
the
often find the
tech guys.
entrepreneurial spirit is very strong in
Oh,
people who
massively
bend
so.
who bend the rules. Like, I often think, like, some of these hackers and these people who scam people and like that. I'm like, how the fuck did you figure that out?
No, it's mad,
like,
isn't it?
It's just highly intelligent people, and I
Yeah.
think that was the same with the original rave scene.
Yeah,
as
well,
well,
you needed that tech element to be able to pull this stuff off, because the thing is that you couldn't
And
hire a van. The people that are running it, they couldn't hire
smoke and
vans.
mirrors as well.
Yeah, totally. But they couldn't hire vehicles to bring in a big sound system, because people knew, this is, it's an absolute God's honest truth. The police were after the guys that were running it. They're called Hardcore Uproar, and now they're called High on Hope. They still do parties. I still play for them. They are still amazing. They've still got the old school spirit. You get a lot of people go to them, and some of their kids go to them as well. They're truly beautiful people, the guys that run it all. Anyway, those guys, they couldn't hire anything to be able to get the speakers and the amps and everything. So what they used to do is buy all the wood and actually go in and build all the speakers and the amps inside the venues, so that then you could open the doors and everything would be built. Unbelievable.
So everything you're talking to me about now is pre the first legal rave.
Yeah,
correct.
100%. Yeah. So this is 1991. This is July 1991. And
I'm going to hit you with an idea now, because we've been talking for almost an hour.
Yeah. Oh, goodness me. Sorry. Wow.
No.
Wow. Sorry.
But I'm thinking we should do a part 2 to this.
Okay. No problem.
Well.
No
Are you
problem.
Up for it?
Of course. Absolutely. Because I'm so sorry to waffle on about it, but
no. Because I never knew you had so much back history.
Right.
I never knew you. I know you from the harder house scene.
Yeah,
I didn't know you had such an in-depth pre 1990 history.
Gotcha. Yeah,
no idea whatsoever.
I'm
kind of unprepared here.
Oh,
so
no problems. I'm just setting the scene for what kind of then led to the next phase, which is actually the phase that talks about. So you sent me a few questions, and
Yeah,
and it,
I mean,
and it took then this is the bed. This is the sort of the background to how that came about, really, and how we got to where you're talking about and that era. It pretty much comes from doing this
because you've
particular
done
party.
so much more after as well.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I've been very blessed to get all those opportunities.
I'm
And
just looking at the questions here. I'm like, origins and early influences, and I'm like, oh,
that's where
okay.
we've got to. That's mental, isn't
We
it?
haven't covered anything else.
Oh no, sorry about that.
We haven't covered music production, Kiss the Funk, Ibiza,
I know.
Kevin and Terry,
I
any of
know.
it.
What
So
on earth?
I'm thinking, fuck it, let's do like another one in a couple of weeks' time if
Listen,
you want.
all good with me. All good with me. No
Yeah.
problem. No,
Because I want to talk to you about your origins in Ibiza.
Yes.
I want to talk to you about your production. You're a promoter as well, obviously.
Yeah.
There's so much to talk about.
I
You've got
know.
residencies in most of or you were playing for most of the big major brands.
Which has been awesome. Yeah, to do all of those.
So you must have all of those. So we've got all of that to discuss. So I'm thinking, let's just do a part two. And to be honest, Rob, I've been having this problem with a lot of guests. Where,
Yeah, right.
Because we've got so much. It's going back 30 years.
Yeah.
How can you fit that in an hour?
I think it's quite difficult. Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is.
It's impossible. I even speaking to like Mark from Head Candy. I mean, we barely scratched the surface. I said, we'll do another one later, But, But I had because obviously I like to create these questions.
Yeah.
But then you just told me all of this about the illegal rave scene and you're coming through. So absolutely fascinating. I think we should do the questions I sent you for a part two.
Of course. I mean, this is the thing: is that this is just kind of like this. This is where it all really. This is where it all then became very real for me. Is that from doing this party, I'm sure you might know the story. I think some people out there probably I think a lot of people out there know it. But I ended up. At this particular party, the police arrived. There was probably about I'll tell you, there was nearly 1,000 people in, but about 3,000 people trying to get in. Were outside the warehouse, and then the police arrived, and then I was playing, and then one of the guys said, "Listen, the party's, the police are here. We're going to have to stop." And I very, very unwisely, and I don't recommend this to anybody at home. I plugged my headphones into the back of the mixer and got on the old microphone, so to speak, and said, "Listen, if you want the party to carry on, we're going to have to fight them." And guess what happened? Everybody fought them, and we ended up having a siege for 3 hours, and I ended up going to prison, Armley Jail, for 3 months for it. I mean, that's a very abbreviated version of what happened. But that's exactly what happened. I ended up doing 3 months in jail for dishonest abstraction of electricity, and for pretty much one down from incitement to riot.
Yeah,
and and then I was sat in the prison behind the bars, looking down onto Leeds. There's a place called Armley, and I was looking down onto all the back-to-back houses, all the Victorian back-to-back houses, and just thought, right, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do when you get out of it? You are either going to make it work, or you're going to have to do something completely different. And you just use it as a springboard. I just thought, right, you know what? I came straight out of there and just got busy. I called in some favours off a few people who said they'd look after me, because I ended up pretty much taking the fall for it. It ended up where Graham Bright, who's the guy who invented the criminal justice bill, he came to my trial, and he was sat with the prosecutors, and he was just saying, "Just get him nicked, get him in. We need to make an example of him. He's got to go to prison."
I'll be honest with you, Kirk mentioned that you got in a bit of trouble.
Yeah.
He said, Kirk said, "I'm not going to say what it is,
Yeah, right.
Because Rob
Okay.
might not want to talk about it.
Yeah, right.
And
Okay.
it was on my list here.
Ah,
It was like,
right. Okay.
it was like, where is it? It's definitely there. It is. Yeah. Bit of trouble.
Yeah,
There we go.
yeah. Definitely a bit of trouble, unfortunately.
Yeah, so
But
that is
honestly,
what it was.
it you know, like I say, I use it as a springboard because then because I was living in Leeds, a lot of the people that I worked with in Leeds and I'd started doing the same thing in Leeds as I'd done everywhere else, which is go and give people tapes and try to find the best nights and get involved basically and out of the back of that, I met a guy who ran a thing called Arc in Leeds, and just prior to that, I met this guy, and he was running this thing at the Trades Club in Leeds, and they used to book Slipmatt and Lime and Carl Cox, Groove Rider, Trevor Fung. All those
Wow.
kind of acts, yeah.
Yeah.
And me and my
Yeah,
mate
yeah.
Mark Leaf, who's still big DJ in Leeds now, we used to be the residents for this particular night at the Trades Club in Leeds, and it's called Dream, it was, and it was illegal as well. So when I say legal, we didn't have a drinks license. So you'd have 1,000 people in there listening to Carl Cox on 3 decks, which were mine and Leafy's decks. And
Wow.
he's the first person who we ever heard play breakbeats. And then as soon as we heard him do that, playing it on 3 decks, we were just like, we want to be breakbeat DJs. And then I went down that road,
Yeah.
and that was right at the birth of breakbeat. That was right at the very
I have
beginning.
a tape of his where he mixes everything
Mm.
from like garage,
Mm.
house,
Oh,
drum
wow.
and bass,
Yeah.
techno,
Yeah.
and it's just like a whole mixture. And that's where when I first heard of him when
Yeah.
I was at university,
Yeah.
and I was just like, this guy is just next level. And I remember all of us he went around the whole university this tape. But we are still in the illegal era, yes?
Yeah.
Let's finish it here.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we're going to start, because people have only got a certain attention span.
Of course, I understand that, yeah.
And I think we're bang on an hour. And
Yeah.
I think we could do a part 2, the legal side of
Oh,
it.
yeah, of course. And I'd love to talk about, our association with One More Time and everything, and just
Absolutely.
how great that's been for us. And just, just before we do wrap it up, yeah, playing there and doing Amnesia. I mean, it's actual wow. It's so much fun, and it's great to see
it's happening again this year.
Yeah, to see what you've created there, and to see that. I just get that feeling that it's just going to keep on snowballing.
It's popular this year.
It's going to
That's all I'm saying.
snowball. It's going to snowball.
That's all I'm saying.
And then there's Eden and all that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's book this in. This second
course,
call.
yeah, 100%.
And then we'll go from there. But Rob, thank you so much for your time.
No
and by
problem.
the way, when you were on your chair putting up the skylight,
Yeah.
I took some photos.
Oh no! My God!
Just in case you fell, and I was just like,
Oh no! You know what? I just didn't want. I'm not. I'm just. I made a pretty tough stuff, and I just thought, well, I'll give it a go. It's sort of semi-worked.
if
So
anyone's watching or listening to us, Rob's got a skylight above him, and it had a really bright light coming down onto the monitor, and it couldn't see him very well, and he's just had a car crash, and he's up a fucking chair with a pair of socks on, putting
I did have my socks on. I know. You know what? It's all good. I'm all good. I'll be fine. I'll be fine.
But more than anything, we're glad to see that you're
Thank
walking
you.
and,
Thank you.
and
Thank
healthy
you.
again, Rob.
Thank you.
But, what I'll do is I'll pop you a message, and
Yeah.
we'll book number 2 in.
I love
for
that.
this,
I'd love that.
And then we can talk about all the other stuff.
Yeah, massive thank you. Great to speak to you, and
Yeah.
100%. Anytime, no problem. I can.
And what a fascinating
shoot the
insight
breeze
into how
all
you
day long
started.
about this stuff. So no
Yeah,
worries.
man. I had no idea you were so involved all that time ago.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.